In this tale, we are going to focus on an area of Azeroth that boasts some of the finest lore ever written in World of Warcraft. We are travelling to the northern reaches of the Eastern Kingdoms to uncover the history of the Plaguelands, covering the entire lore of the zone, including the stories of Stratholme, Scholomance, the Knights of the Silver Hand, and the battle for Light's Hope Chapel. The Plaguelands were once a thriving and beautiful region of Azeroth. The lively city of Stratholme lay to the north, while the surrounding areas were filled with small towns, villages, and a close-knit community that farmed the land to sustain the Grand Kingdom of Lordaeron. Known previously as Eastweald, this lush area provided its inhabitants with either the peace and harmony that a simple farming life offered, or for those seeking a faster-paced lifestyle, there was always the hustle and bustle of the grand city of Stratholme. However, as we know today, this idyllic image of this area is a far cry from its current, harsh reality. In this tale, we will uncover the true history of Stratholme and these appropriately named Plagued Lands. Situated at the very heart of the once great kingdom of Lordaeron, Eastweald occupied the land between the Tirisfal Glades to the west, the hinterlands to the south, and the forested area to the north known as Quel'Thalas. However, this human-dominated region of Azeroth appeared vastly different in the past. The origins of these plagued lands trace back thousands of years to the beginnings of the human tribes, nearly 2,800 years before the events at the Dark Portal. The High Elves of Quel'Thalas found themselves locked in perpetual conflict with the native and dominating Amani trolls. These moss-skinned trolls, known for their ability to regenerate limbs and heal injuries, were a savage and malevolent race. With their empire sprawling across the vast majority of northern Lordaeron, the trolls fiercely defended their borders against any perceived threats. Meanwhile, the scattered human tribes of Lordaeron waged internal battles for supremacy over their respective lands. Amidst the chaos, the Arathi tribe recognised the growing menace posed by the trolls and sought to unify the disparate human tribes against their common enemy. Through 6 years of cunning strategy and military prowess, the Arathi gradually subjugated rival tribes, including the human tribes from the Alterac Mountains and from the Tirisfal Glades, offering peace and equality to the conquered in exchange for their loyalty. The humans of Tirisfal, led by the great warrior Lordaeron, were more refined than the savage mountain tribes. Deeply religious, they performed rituals at shrines and revered Tyr's silver hand, often wearing its image as pendants. Unlike the Alteraci, they resisted force and required the leader of the Arathor nation, Thoradin, to appeal to their beliefs to gain their loyalty. Thoradin made a pilgrimage to Tirisfal's sacred sites and pledged to adopt and spread their religious practices. He sealed this promise by cutting his palm and mixing his blood with the earth, declaring, "Between our people, let this be the only blood we spill." The Tirisfal humans then joined him, with Lordaeron becoming one of his generals. Lordaeron's sister, Merelda, was among the first followers of the Holy Light, which the Arathi adopted and eventually leading to the Church of the Holy Light years later. The culmination of the Arathi's efforts was the establishment of Strom, a mighty fortress city in southern Lordaeron and the capital of the newly formed Arathor nation. Rumours of the elves' plight reached Strom, prompting Thoradin to realise the true extent of the troll threat. Desperate for aid, elven ambassadors arrived, seeking military assistance against the troll armies. The king accepted, and the war against the trolls began. During the final days of the Troll Wars, as King Thoradin and his forces retreated to Alterac Fortress, the Amani rapidly gained ground, threatening to flank and overwhelm Arathor's armies. To prevent disaster, General Lordaeron volunteered to hold back the forest trolls, knowing he would not survive. Lordaeron and his warriors died fighting, but their sacrifice secured victory for Arathor and Quel'Thalas. After the Troll Wars, many of Arathor's soldiers migrated back to the fertile lands of Tirisfal, where they established a central stronghold and renamed the region Lordaeron in Lordaeron's honour. Similar to what we see in the southern expanse of the Eastern Kingdoms, where the Kingdom of Stormwind thrives on the hard work of those farming the lands of Elwyn Forest, Westfall, and at that time Brightwood and beyond, Eastweald served as the equivalent for the Kingdom of Lordaeron, the city being built on the hard work of the surrounding community, who farmed the fertile soils to feed the expanding population. As the population grew, humans began to spread their influence into the surrounding lands. In this region, several towns and villages emerged from old fortresses that were built during the war with the Trolls. Some of these include Andorhal, Hearthglen and Caer Darrow in the western side of East Weald, and then Darrowshire, Corin's Crossing and Tyr's Hand on the eastern side. At this moment in time, the population of the area was governed by the newly established city of Stratholme, which had quickly become the second largest city in Lordaeron in the years that followed the Troll Wars. The people of East Weald not only looked to the Kingdom of Lordaeron and the governing city of Stratholme for leadership, but also devoted themselves to the new emerging religion, the worship of the Holy Light. The Holy Light can be briefly described as an endless, shimmering sea of energy situated outside the barriers of reality. It is one of the two most fundamental forces in the universe, along with the Void. The people of East Weald built Light's Hope Chapel in the easternmost reaches of the region, using it as their main place of worship. This makes Light's Hope Chapel one of the oldest and most revered holy sites for the humans. Since the days of the Troll Wars, the humans of Lordaeron had not faced such a formidable force again. However, true to their nature, they constructed fortresses to ensure that they were prepared for any future invasions. One of these fortresses was Caer Darrow. Located on a small island in the middle of East Weald, on the surface it appeared to be a typical human stronghold meant to protect the kingdom's people. But this was far from the truth. It secretly housed an ancient High Elven runestone. A few thousand years prior, shortly after Quel'Thalos was founded, many High Elves became concerned that their use of arcane magic might once again attract the Burning Legion to Azeroth as it had during the War of the Ancients. To address this, Dath Ramar Sunstrider tasked his most powerful arcanists with finding a solution. They devised a plan to create a protective barrier called Ban Denorial, known in our tongue, the Gatekeeper, around their land. This barrier would conceal their magic from others, deter their superstitious Amani rivals, and diminish the magic of all non-elves within its bounds. Over several decades, the Arcanists constructed a series of monolithic runestones along the borders of Quel'Thalos to define the barrier's limits. These runestones were powered by the Sunwell and linked to the mother tree Thassalar, combining the tree's natural magic with the elves' arcane spells. One of these runestones was located on the island of Caer Darrow. This leads us smoothly into our next chapter, which delves into the lore of this area during the Second War. Fast forwarding through time, the humans of Lordaeron lived peacefully for thousands of years, farming the land, devoting themselves to the Holy Light, and supporting the kingdom. However, everything changed drastically in the year 0. Medivh, the corrupted guardian of the realm, joined forces with an otherworldly warlock named Gul'dan. Together, they opened the Dark Portal in the Black Morass, located in the southern reaches of the continent. This event would alter the history of Azeroth forever. The Orcish horde from the planet Draenor poured through the Dark Portal, decimating human settlements in the south and sparking the First War. The humans of the Kingdom of Stormwind battled the Orcish horde for years before being overrun, ultimately losing their grand city. Anduin Lothar, known as the Lion of Stormwind and a knight champion during the First War, made a desperate bid to save his people. He led the remaining population north by sea from Stormwind Harbour, seeking refuge in the lands of Lordaeron. In the 4th year after the Orcish horde's arrival, Lothar and the people of Stormwind reached Lordaeron. Meanwhile, in the south, empowered by their victory over the humans of Stormwind, the horde prepared for their next phase of the invasion, aiming to conquer the entire continent. Their next targets were the lands of Khazmodan and then Lordaeron. This phase, known in the history books as the Second War, saw the horde surging northward, establishing a grand base of operations at Blackrock Mountain. The horde launched two major assaults. The southern offensive swept through the dwarven lands of Khazmodan, conquering most of the region except for the dwarven capital of Ironforge and the gnomish capital of Gnomeregan. The northern offensive advanced from the Grey Sea, just as Anduin Lothar had travelled. Once they landed, the horde achieved significant success initially, using enslaved red dragons and nearly capturing the capital city of Lordaeron after receiving help from a band of treacherous humans. However, the tide of the war began to turn in the favour of the Alliance due to several factors, one of which was the founding of the Knights of the Order of the Silver Hand. The alliance was made up of various nations, some of which were rivals with differing customs and ways of life. Lothar needed something to unite them, champions who could rally all humans regardless of their origin. The answer came from the Church of the Holy Light. Archbishop Alonsus Fowl met with Lothar. Fowl proposed creating a new order that embodied the best qualities of humanity: soldiers proficient in wielding the light, skilled in traditional warfare, and exemplifying loyalty, bravery, and honour. With Lothar's consent, and from within Alonsus Chapel, inside the city walls of Stratholme, Fowl and Uther recruited noble knights and priests from Lordaeron to train in the ways of the light and martial combat. The first recruits included Tirion, a priest instrumental in forging the alliance at the Council of Seven Nations; Saidan Dathrahan, a man of immense physical strength; Tirion Fordring, a knight renowned for his zeal and resilience; Uther, an accomplished knight and devout believer who had apprenticed under Fowl; and Gavinrad the Dire, a battle-hardened knight from Stormwind and comrade of Lothar who had fought in the First War. The orcs advanced and reached Eastweald. The island of Kayadara was invaded by the Horde, the fortress was sacked, and the sacred runestone was captured. The stone was then split into pieces and would be later used to create the Altars of Storms, arcane structures that allowed Gul'dan to imbue the Horde's ogre allies with magic. When Uther embarked on a mission of mercy to aid and comfort the survivors of the raid on Kayadaro, he was ambushed by privateers from Alterac. In the ensuing naval battle, some of the Alterac soldiers were captured. Under questioning in Lordaeron's capital, they confessed to their nation's treachery against the Alliance and admitted that their kingdom had assisted the Horde in their passage through the mountains. As a result, some paladins joined the Alliance troops led by the High Elf Milan to rescue captured civilians and attack Alterac City, aiming to stop Horde reinforcements from reaching the capital city of Lordaeron. Without these reinforcements and Alterac's support, the Horde struggled, leading to an Alliance victory and the Horde's full retreat back to Khazmodan. The Knights of the Silver Hand played a crucial role in pushing back the Horde, liberating Khazmodan and ultimately forcing the Horde back to the Dark Portal itself. Tirion led the Alliance's charge against the Orcs' final stronghold, in what became the fiercest and bloodiest battle of the Second War. The Azerothian side of the Dark Portal was destroyed, partly due to the bravery and skill of Uther and the Order of the Silver Hand. Afterward, Tirion and other paladins rallied the Alliance forces. Facing the Knights' formation, many orcs panicked. Some fought to the death, others surrendered, and some fled. Thanks to the Knights, the Alliance achieved victory. While the Alliance secured a decisive victory over the Orcish Horde, the threat was not entirely eliminated. As mentioned, some of the orcs scattered across the land, with many being captured by the Alliance. The Alliance of Lordaeron took decisive measures to contain the Orcish threat, constructing several large internment camps in southern Lordaeron. These camps were guarded by both seasoned soldiers and paladins of the Silver Hand, such as Captain Scarlock at Durnhold Keep. Despite the tense atmosphere among the captive orcs, the camp wardens maintained peace and enforced order effectively. As years passed and tensions eased, a lasting peace settled over Lordaeron. With his paladins, the Supreme Commander Uther preserved peace in the kingdom. Meanwhile, his apprentice and the son of the King of Lordaeron, Arthas Menethil, was integrated into the ranks of the Silver Hand through a ceremony at the Cathedral of Light conducted by Archbishop Alonsus Fowl himself. During this period, Tirion Fordring, Lord of Mardenhold, was overseeing and governing the town of Hearthglen, situated in the northern region of Eastweald. Here, Tirion encountered an aging orc warrior residing in the ruins of an abandoned watchtower near Hearthglen. Initially enemies, they engaged in combat that caused the tower to collapse. Eitrig, the orc, ultimately saved the unconscious Tyrion's life by pulling him from the rubble. This act forged a sense of honour, and Tirion felt like he owed the orc his life. However, this bond did not prevent Eitrig from later being captured, facing execution in Stratholme. Eitrig was spared thanks to Tyrion's timely intervention. For his actions against Alliance soldiers, Tirion was brought to Stratholme to stand trial before a jury, despite being offered freedom in exchange for breaking his vow to the Silver Hand. Tirion refused. Consequently, Uther had no choice but to excommunicate Tirion from Lordaeron, forcing him into exile and a life of wandering and seclusion as an outcast. For a decade following these events, Eastweald remained relatively tranquil. The Kingdom of Lordaeron focused on rebuilding its strength and commemorating its triumph over the Horde, striving for a peaceful existence. Unbeknownst to them though, masterminds of the Burning Legion were plotting global domination once again. Following their defeat in the Second War, the Old Horde's war chief, Ner'zhul, was captured by Kil'jaeden as punishment for his failure. The Deceiver destroyed Ner'zhul's body and tortured his spirit until he agreed to serve the Legion once more. Ner'zhul's soul was then encased in an armour and bound to the frozen throne by Kil'jaeden, who hurled this creation towards Azeroth. It crashed into the Ice-Crown Glacier and essentially giving rise to the Lich King, pivotal figure later in the Third War. Upon arriving on Azeroth, the Lich King seized control of Northrend and began scheming with the necromancer Kel'Thuzad to conquer Azeroth. During this very period, a young orc named Thrall managed to escape from his captivity in Durnhold Keep and began freeing and uniting the Horde under a new banner. A handful of powerful individuals around the world heard the Lich King's mental summons from Northrend, the most notable of them being Kel'Thuzad. He was the first to answer the call. The Lich King was pleased with his latest recruit, promising Kel'Thuzad immortality and great power in exchange for his loyalty and obedience. Disguised, Kel'Thuzad returned to Lordaeron and set up the floating dread citadel of Naxxramas. We'll come back to Naxxramas later on in the story. Over 3 years, he used his wealth and intellect to gather a secretive brotherhood of like-minded men and women, which he then later named the Cult of the Damned. The cult promised its acolytes social equality and eternal life in exchange for their service to Ner'zhul. Kel'Thuzad ensured the cult's activities remained hidden from Lordaeron's authorities. On Kayadaro, Kel'Thuzad struck a deal with the Barov family, allowing some of his cultists to move into the newly formed school of necromancy that was located here. The school would go on to be known to us adventurers as Scholarmans. He also persuaded his friend, Baron Rivendare, to join the cult. With Kel'Thuzad's success in Lordaeron, the Lich King made final preparations for his assault on human civilization. Placing plague energies into portable artifacts, called plague cauldrons, Ner'zhul ordered Kel'Thuzad to transport these cauldrons to Lordaeron. The cauldrons were hidden within various cult-controlled villages and served as plague generators, spreading a plague across the farmlands and cities of northern Lordaeron. The Lich King's plan worked perfectly, and many of Lordaeron's northern villages were contaminated almost immediately. Prior to the Third War, Andorhal served as the distribution centre for all agricultural supplies in the northern provinces of Lordaeron. In the 17th year after the events of the Dark Portal, Kel'Thuzad and the Cult of the Damned used it alongside the small town of Brill in Tirisfal Glades to spread the Plague of Undeath by infecting the grain, which was then sent to various northern villages along the King's Road, including Hearthglen and Stratholme. As a result, Andorhal was one of the first places hit by the plague, though it remained free from direct Scourge control years later. The people of Eastweald, most still unaware of this insidious plague, consumed the infected grain, unknowingly sealing their tragic fates. The Alliance forces observed a grim metamorphosis taking place in Eastweald as the plague began to ravage the land. Once vibrant and teeming with life, the region now languished as vegetation withered, farms turned desolate, and animals succumbed to the disease. This agonizing transformation marked the beginning of the end for the once prosperous and lush Eastweald. When Prince Arthas Menethil and Jaina Proudmoore arrived in Andorhal to investigate, they found burning buildings but no sign of villagers. Kel'Thuzad suddenly appeared, revealing his identity and his intentions. Determined to stop him, Arthas searched the city for the empty granaries and then pursued the necromancer as he escaped. Heading north and eventually found Kel'Thuzad. The necromancer informed Arthas that he was a servant of a greater power, a dreadlord named Mal'Ganis. Enraged, Arthas vowed to kill Mal'Ganis and slayed the corrupted wizard Kel'Thuzad on the spot.
Naive fool. My death will make little difference in the long run. For now, the scourging of this land begins.
While stationed in Hearthglen, Arthas and Jaina's forces came under attack by hordes of undead. Arthas instructed Jaina to locate Uther while he and his troops defended the town from the Scourge, the people of Lordaeron who had already been infected. It was during this battle that Arthas uncovered the horrifying truth about the plague. Those afflicted didn't just perish, they rose again as undead minions of the Scourge. Before being overwhelmed, Uther and his knights arrived in the nick of time, rescuing Hearthglen from destruction. Shortly thereafter, Arthas encountered Medivh, who urged him to journey west to Kalimdor. Despite Jaina's belief in the prophet's warning, Arthas remained steadfast in his conviction to stand by his people and refused to abandon Lordaeron. Together, they pressed on towards Stratholme to confront the looming threat of the Scourge.
Lead them across the sea, to the west.
Flee? My place is here, and my only course is to defend my people.
The demon Mal'Ganis specifically targeted Stratholme for its strategic and economic significance as Eastworld's heart, and as a revered site for the birthplace of the Silver Hand Paladin Order. Losing Stratholme to the Plague meant losing control of Eastworld itself. As the first undead began to stir in Stratholme, Prince Arthas, accompanied by Uther and Jaina Proudmoore and their soldiers, arrived in Stratholme to find the city already gripped by the Plague's horrors. Arthas, driven by grim determination, concluded that purging Stratholme was the only way to prevent it from becoming a bastion of the Scourge.
This entire city must be purged.
What?
He commanded his companions to put down the infected before they could transform into mindless undead. For Arthas, this was a desperate act of mercy and a brutal necessity. Yet, his allies, Jaina, Uther, and their loyal paladins, refused to partake in Arthas's merciless purge, viewing his actions as sheer madness.
Have you lost your mind, Arthas?
Undeterred by their objections, Arthas and a handful of resolute soldiers pressed on with their grim task. Flames soon engulfed the city. Ash and smoke filled the streets, and cries of anguish mingled with the clash of steel and the shattering of bones. Blood flowed freely across the cobblestones as Arthas and his men ruthlessly cut down both the plagued and the undead alike. In the midst of the inferno, Arthas confronted Mal'Ganis, who mocked and goaded him to follow to Northrend before slipping away. With grim resolve, Arthas rallied his forces, who were now going by the name of Death Lords, and departed as the fires consumed what remained of Stratholme's once bustling streets. Days later, upon their return, Jaina and Uther were greeted by a haunting scene, streets littered with lifeless bodies and the charred remnants of what was once a proud city, now reduced to ashes.
So much death. I can't believe Arthas could have done this.
In the southern town of Southshore, Alexandros Mograine, a knight of the Silver Hand, gathered his fellow knights, Isilian, Abendis, Doan and Fairbanks at the local inn. They convened to discuss an artifact in Mograine's possession and its potential use in halting the Scourge's advance across Lordaeron. Their meeting, however, was interrupted by Lord Commander Saidan Dathrahan, who brought the news of the Culling of Stratholme. He also informed them that Arthas's contentious actions led to the suspension of the Silver Hand. Faced with this dire situation, the Assembly had no choice but to continue their mission in secrecy. Mograine then travelled to Ironforge with his artifact, where it underwent a transformation into a weapon designed to avenge the death of King Magni's brother, Muradin Bronzebeard, during his time in Northrend. Upon completing the forging process, Magni acclaimed the weapon as the pinnacle of his craftsmanship. During their stay in Ironforge, the knights received grim news. Arthas had pursued Mal'Ganis to Northrend and returned to Lordaeron as one of the Lich King's Death Knights. This treacherous act culminated in Arthas murdering his own father, King Menethil II, which then ultimately led to the fall of Lordaeron's capital.
Succeeding you, father.
This kingdom shall fall, and from the ashes shall arise a new order that will shake the very foundations of the world.
Driven by fury over the prospect of losing his children, Mograine and Fairbanks rode tirelessly, day and night, to reach his home in Eastweald. Upon arrival, they discovered that Reno and Darion Mograine were sheltered under the protection of Talon Fordring at Hearthclan. When the Scourge assaulted them, Alexandros wielded his new sword and absolutely obliterated the undead with such force that only clouds of ash remained in their wake. The mighty weapon came to be known as the Ashbringer. Upon his return, Arthas embarked on a brutal campaign across the lands of Lordaeron, including the town of Andorhal. Despite the dire circumstances, Andorhal remained one of the few places under Alliance control in the region. It served as a stronghold where Uther and the surviving paladins gathered to mount counterattacks against the Scourge. Arthas and his minions launched a relentless assault on the town, seeking a magical urn at its heart for necromantic purposes. In an epic confrontation, the Supreme Commander Uther stood against Arthas and initially gained the upper hand. The revered paladin held his ground against Arthas and achieved what no one else had. He bested the Death Knight in combat, sending the unholy warrior sprawling. However, in a twist of fate, Frostmourne returned to Arthas's grasp, imbuing him with an even greater power from the Lich King. The tide of the battle shifted in Arthas's favour, and eventually Uther, bloodied and wounded, knelt and uttered his last words to Arthas. Arthas coldly replied that he intended to live forever, and delivered a fatal blow.
Light, save my soul.
When Frostmourne struck him, it shattered Uther's soul, with one fragment consumed by the blade and another taken by the Tirion to the realm of Bastion in the Shadowlands.
Uther.
Where am I?
Welcome to Bastion.
Shifting our focus back to the mortal realm, the Scourging of Lordaeron was nearing its completion. The resistance against the Scourge was particularly brutal in Darrowshire. There, the Ghoul, Horgus the Ravager, and the Death Knight, Marduk Blackpool, known as Marduk the Black, marshalled the Scourge against the town, slaying all who sought refuge within their homes. To the east of Darrowshire, Lord Maxwell Tyrosus and a select few were assigned the covert mission of retrieving the bodies of 1,000 fallen champions of the light and transporting them to Light's Hope Chapel. Here they were reburied in the consecrated ground, safeguarding them from being resurrected as tools of the Lich King's undead forces. With Stratholme in flames and the settlements of Andorhal, Caer-Darrow, Darrowshire, Corin's Crossing, all overrun by the Scourge, the plague continued to spread. By this point it was concluded that both Eastweald and Lordaeron had fallen. Any human survivors couldn't bear to even utter the name Eastweald. Over time they began referring to the land as the Plaguelands, distinguishing the regions, the Western and the Eastern Plaguelands. Following the fall of Lordaeron, Alexandros Mograine rallied remnants of the Knights of the Silver Hand into a crusade, aiming to reclaim the shattered kingdom from both the Scourge and the renegade undead forces now known as the Forsaken. In the Eastern Plaguelands, they seized control of Tyr's Hand and Hearthglen, where their leader Mograine began plotting ways to strike back at the Scourge. During one of their excursions, Alexandros Mograine was accompanied by his companions and his two children, Reno and Darion Mograine, who by this point were now members of the Crusade. Together, they entered the burning ruins of Stratholme. Despite warnings from Abendis about the city's dangers, Alexandros confirmed the peril with his own eyes. As they advanced, a collapsing building separated the group, forcing them to fight their way through the undead to reunite. Darion was injured by a skeletal mage, and Saidan Dathrahan was slain by the Dreadlord, Balnazar. Balnazar would then possess Saidan's body with the intention of infiltrating the Paladin Order. Eventually, Alexandros found an escape route for all of them. Weeks later, Alexandros, accompanied by Lord Maxwell Tyrosus, Bridget Abendis, and his advisor Fairbanks, spied on the splintered group of the undead called the Forsaken as they took possession of the ruins of Lordaeron. Noting that the Forsaken were unlike the Scourge and possessed free will, Alexandros recognised their superior organisation and declared the need for reinforcements from Tyr's hand to amass an army capable of reclaiming the ruins of the capital city of Lordaeron. To prepare for this future conflict, Alexandros led his party to the old monastery in Tirisfal Glades, establishing it as a forward base. From there, the remaining members of the Knights of the Silver Hand gradually transformed into a fanatical religious sect dedicated to eradicating the undead from Lordaeron. This ideology spread beyond the monastery's walls, leading to the formation of the Scarlet Crusade. You can learn more about the formation and the lore behind the Scarlet Crusade and the Scarlet Monastery in our dedicated tale. A safe portal can be found in the description below. Not all survivors agreed with the Scarlet Crusade's ideology. Some believed their comrades had strayed from their once noble purpose and chose to leave the order. Lord Maxwell Tyrosus spearheaded this separation and went on to form the Argent Dawn. Although they shared the same goals of protecting Azeroth from threats like the Burning Legion and the Scourge, the Argent Dawn adopted a less fanatical, more balanced approach. They established control over areas such as Chillwind Camp, the Bulwark, and their capital, Light's Hope Chapel. We have now set the scene for when we adventurers arrived in the Plaguelands in the 25th year following the events at the Dark Portal. 3 different factions all vying for control over the land: the Scarlet Crusade, the Argent Dawn, and of course, the Undead. Following the defeat of the Burning Legion in the Third War and the consolidation of the Western Plaguelands by the Scourge, Andorhal became a regional stronghold for the Scourge. Andorhal served as the headquarters for the Lich, Araj the Summoner, who used the ruined city as his base of operations. From there, he oversaw the deployment of the mighty plague cauldrons situated throughout the Western Plaguelands. When many adventurers arrived in the Western Plaguelands after somehow surviving the dangers of the Stranglethorn Vale, they were met by the Argent Dawn at Chillwind Camp. They were tasked with uncovering the truth about Andorhal. Their missions included eliminating Scourge and Forsaken forces, clearing the area of skeletons, and slaying key figures such as the Liches and the Valkyr. Additionally, the adventurers were asked to pay their respects to Uther the Lightbringer at his tomb, just south of Andorhal, and to scout out Hearthglen to report back on the strength of the emerging Scarlet Crusade. It was here that a rumour was confirmed. Talon Fordring, the son of the revered paladin and knight of the Silver Hand, Tirion Fordring, had become a high-ranking member of the Scarlet Crusade. To save his son from the Scarlet Crusade, Tirion enlisted the adventurers' help. He asked them to meet with Miranda the Hag at Uther's tomb, where they would be disguised to infiltrate Hearthglen and deliver Tyrion's gift by the Scarlet Crusaders. Upon receiving the box and its contents, Talon Fordring agreed to leave the Scarlet Crusade and reunite with his father outside the town. However, this betrayal to the cause enraged Grand Crusader Dathrahan, who had been previously possessed by the Demon Lord Balnazar. Dathrahan sent Grand Inquisitor Ysilion to kill the Fordrings. After defeating the assassins, Tirion rushed to Hearthglen, where he witnessed Ysilion killing Talon. Fueled by his son's death, Tirion avenged him and vowed over his son's body to reform the original Order of the Silver Hand as its High Lord, once more dedicated to extinguishing the evil that plagued the world. The adventurers were then sent on a quest into the more devastated section of the Plaguelands, the Eastern Plaguelands. Here, they were tasked with uncovering the truth of the area, reliving the events of the Battle of Darrowshire, and defending their land against the Scarlet Crusade in Tyr's hand. However, these quests were minor compared to the challenges they would face in the area later on. By this time, the ruined city of Stratholme had become the largest stronghold held by the Scourge in all of Lordaeron. Leading the undead forces in the city was a former noble turned Death Knight named Baron Rivendare, who coordinated the Lich King's efforts in the Plaguelands. In life, Baron Rivendare was a wealthy landowner in Stratholme and a friend of Kel'Thuzad, who had previously convinced him to join the Cult of the Damned. From within the walls of Stratholme, Rivendare constantly battled the forces of the Scarlet Crusade and the Argent Dawn. However, one small area in Stratholme still remained under the control of the living, the Scarlet Bastion, from where the Grand Crusader Saidan Dathrahan himself led the crusade against the Scourge. The Crusaders' fanaticism led them to believe that anyone who was not a member of their order was corrupted by the undead and had to be destroyed. As a result, the Argent Dawn sent adventurers in to kill the Grand Crusader, and to their surprise, they discovered that the Grand Crusader had actually been dead for years and was being impersonated by the Dreadlord Balnazzar. After slaying Baron Rivendare in a brutal encounter, the adventurers eventually overcame the demon Balnazzar as well. This was not the last violence the walls of Stratholme would see. Remnants of the Scarlet Crusade still remained inside, tasked with dealing with the Scourge on their own. Eventually, the master of the Scourge in Lordaeron, Kel'Thuzad, returned to the Blighted Land. From his citadel of Naxxramas, hovering ominously over the Plague Wood near Stratholme, Kel'Thuzad prepared to continue his dark work in the name of his master, the Lich King. Naxxramas, the dread citadel, stood as an unassailable fortress, cementing Kel'Thuzad's reign. However, hope glimmered with the Argent Dawn. Darion Mograine, driven by the legacy of his father, Alexandros, the former wielder of the Ashbringer, dared to infiltrate the floating fortress. Though he ultimately failed and lost his life, Darion succeeded in freeing his father from undeath, granting Alexandros' spirit eternal rest. This left Naxxramas significantly weakened, as Alexandros had been one of the 4 horsemen, the Citadel's elite commanders. Seizing this opportunity, and with the assistance of the most elite adventurers, the Argent Dawn launched an all-out assault on Naxxramas. They managed to defeat Kel'Thuzad, though he escaped his death. Shortly thereafter, the Dark Fortress mysteriously vanished from the Plaguelands, leaving the region in an uneasy peace. Sometime after the disappearance of Naxxramas, in the 26th year following the events of the Dark Portal, the invasion of Outland begins. The war's primary objective is to prevent the Legion from establishing a stronghold in Outland, which they could use to launch further attacks on Azeroth through the Dark Portal. During this time, a nobleman from the Plaguelands named Maddox decided to reclaim the fallen town of Andorhal. Driven by selfish and egotistical motives, Maddox believed he could succeed where others had failed. Using his father's wealth, he assembled a mercenary army and somehow convinced the Argent Dawn to assist him. Unbeknownst to them, the Scourge army lay in wait, hiding in buildings and in the water. Soon, the entire Argent Dawn force from Chillwind Camp was decimated, with only a few mercenaries surviving. This failed attempt to retake Andorhal showed the Scourge was a formidable force, making light work of the 100 men who dared to challenge them. A few years later, in the 27th year after the opening of the Dark Portal, the Lich King, formerly known as Prince Arthas, had reached the pinnacle of his power, and the war against him began. Across Azeroth, several organisations were established to bring the end to the Lich King's threat once and for all. Foremost among these was a group called the Argent Crusade, formed following the war's first significant conflict, the Battle for Light's Hope Chapel. The Lich King commanded the creation of a new Scourge necropolis, Acheras the Ebon Hold. It was designed with a single purpose in mind, to train and deploy Death Knights across Azeroth in his bid for domination. Acheras was so formidable that even the dread citadel of Naxxramas wouldn't have been able to withstand a direct assault from it. It was deployed and positioned in the Eastern Plaguelands, east of Tyr's Hand, in an area known as the Scarlet Enclave, and from here it served as a training ground for Death Knights with their singular mission to annihilate the Lich King's opposition, the Scarlet Crusade and the Argent Dawn, the remaining bastions of light in the Plaguelands. The halls of Acheras were filled with the bodies of fallen heroes, gathered by the Scourge to be resurrected as Death Knights. Under the supervision of the feared instructor, Resuvius, Scourge necromancers raised these bodies, assessing their worthiness. Those deemed worthy donned the armour of the Herald of Arthas, while those found lacking were fed to ravenous ghouls. Once their training was complete, the Death Knights launched their campaign. They ravaged the towns of Havenshire and New Avalon, slaughtering their inhabitants and obliterating the last army of the Scarlet Crusade. Those who managed to survive the massacre somehow went on to form a new group called the Scarlet Onslaught, setting their sights on Northrend to continue their divine mission. Some remnants of the Scarlet Crusade remained in Tyr's Hand after the massacres, but they were no longer of mortal flesh. They had been transformed into undead warriors. These undead Scarlet Crusaders were led by Lord Valdelmar and Linnea Abendis, daughter of High General Bridget of Bendis. Bridget had survived the attacks on Tyr's Hand and assumed a new role as the High General and commander of the newly formed Scarlet Onslaught, which had relocated to Northrend and established New Hearthglen in Dragonblight. When atop Acheras, the Lich King was accompanied by 2 Valkyr battle maidens and then later by Prince Keleseth and Prince Valenar. Having shattered the defences of New Avalon and Havenshire in the Scarlet Enclave, the Lich King turned his gaze toward the final bastion of resistance in the Plaguelands, Light's Hope Chapel. This sacred ground where the Argent Dawn made its stand was the last hope of the light against the encroaching darkness. Bolstering his forces with reinforcements from Hearthglen and Tirisfal, the Lich King dispatched his elite Death Knights to spearhead the assault. Their mission was to bring out the venerable Tirion Fordring, a legendary champion of the light, and crush him to shatter the resolve of Azeroth's defenders. A colossal army of 10,000 Scourge troops, commanded by the fearsome Death Knights such as High Lord Darion Mograine, wielder of the cursed corrupted Ashbringer, and including figures like Orbaz Bloodbane, Koltira Deathweaver, and Thessarion, assembled before the chapel. They faced a valiant but vastly outnumbered force of only 300 defenders, a courageous remnant of the Argent Dawn's leadership standing resolute within the chapel's walls. The battle raged fiercely, and the Scourge made swift progress, breaking through a third of the Argent Dawn's defences before Tirion Fordring stepped forth to confront High Lord Mograine. With the power of the light, Tirion fought valiantly, repelling the undead onslaught and forcing Mograine to withdraw. The confrontation turned dire when Alexandros Mograine, the legendary Ashbringer, made a dramatic appearance. Darion was momentarily transported to a past memory where he had once envisioned himself wielding the Ashbringer alongside his father. Their reunion was tragically cut short when the Lich King himself manifested, banishing Alexandros to the void and revealing the attack on Light's Hope Chapel had been a mere ploy to ensnare Tirion. Fueled by rage at this betrayal, Darion unleashed his fury upon the Lich King, but was swiftly subdued. The Lich King, seizing the opportunity, attempted to consume Tyrion's soul with Frostmourne as Lord Maxwell Tyrosis rallied the defenders for a final desperate charge. Their efforts, however, were met with overwhelming force as the Lich King's power cast them aside. In a moment of unexpected hope, Darion, struggling against the Lich King's control, managed to deliver the corrupted Ashbringer to Tirion Fordring. With the light's might coursing through the blade, Tirion purified the weapon in a blinding burst of holy energy. Armed with the restored Ashbringer, Tirion advanced on the Lich King, who, recognizing the peril of facing such a force on sacred ground, retreated and vowed that their next encounter would not occur within the confines of holy territory. As the battle subsided, Tirion revived Darion, and the fallen hero's spirits were honoured. The paladins of the Argent Dawn and the remnants of the Order of the Silver Hand found renewed purpose in the formation of the Argent Crusade. United under High Lord Fordring's banner, they pledged to marshal their combined strength to bring the Lich King to justice. Amidst the conflict, many Death Knights had broken free from the Lich King's grasp. Darion Mograine gathered these freed souls and bestowed upon them a new name, the Knights of the Ebon Blade. Thus, a new chapter began, marked by the union of the Argent Crusade's righteous fury and the Ebon Blade's newfound resolve to confront the darkness that threatened Azeroth. After the world's focus shifted to Northrend, the war against the Lich King continued until his defeat at the Frozen Throne towards the end of the 27th year. Following the Lich King's fall, a sub-faction of the Argent Crusade became more prominent in the Eastern Plaguelands. Led by Eligor Dawnbringer and Corfax, the Brotherhood of the Light operated with fewer moral restraints, devoid of guilt and what they considered useless human emotions. Despite trying to balance the newly formed Argent Crusade's scholarly approach with the Scarlet Crusade's merciless tactics, the Brotherhood of Light remained steadfast in their shared ultimate goal, ridding the land of Lordaeron of any remaining Scourge. The Brotherhood initiated their campaign against the remaining Scourge and Risen forces in Lordaeron with an assault force of 100 men, aiming to reclaim the cities of Stratholme and Tyr's Hand for the Argent Crusade. Aided by adventurers, they successfully captured Tyr's Hand and eliminated the undead Scarlet leadership, including the undead Lord Valdelmar himself. The victory marked the end of the Scarlet Crusade's control over Tyr's Hand as the Brotherhood took over, but Stratholme would prove to be a different challenge. After adventurers had overcome the Dreadlord Balnazzar some years earlier, Balnazzar shed his human guise and slaughtered all the Crusaders in the western portion of Stratholme, raising them into the Undeath called the Risen. In the eastern part of the city, Baron Rivendare was resurrected and travelled to Naxxramas to join the dreaded Four Horsemen. His position as ruler over Stratholme was taken over by his son, the fallen paladin Orius Rivendare. The Brotherhood of the Light offered rewards to the adventurers to help eliminate these threats. After slaying both leaders, the Argent Crusade attacked the remaining undead and briefly took control of the ruined city of Stratholme, establishing Alonza's Chapel and the Scarlet Bastion as their bases. However, the undead continued to haunt its streets, making their control only temporary. During this period, Azeroth faced the return of Deathwing the Destroyer. While the world rallied to repel the forces of the corrupted Black Dragon, the Argent Crusade in the Plaguelands continued their tireless quest to restore the region to its former glory. The Argent Crusade also joined forces with the Cenarian Circle to help the Plaguelands heal from its blighted state. Following the shattering of Azeroth, both the Alliance and the Forsaken launched major efforts to expel the Scourge from Andorhal. The city became a war zone. The Alliance held the southwestern side of the city, reinforced by Chillwind Camp, while the Forsaken secured the northeastern side. Araj the Summoner led the remnants of the Lich King's forces in Andorhal, their power greatly diminished by their lord's previous death. The conflict culminated in the Battle for Andorhal. The combined forces relentlessly slaughtered the Scourge and ultimately slew the Lich, Araj the Summoner. Sylvanas Windrunner intervened, using Valkyr to turn the tide and force the Alliance to flee the city. Just outside of Andorhal, across Lake Darrowmere, our story returns to Caer Darrow, more commonly known as Scholomance. After the death of the Lich King, the Scourge was significantly weakened. With no strong leadership in Scholomance, Dark Master Gandling, a human necromancer from the Cult of the Damned, used his ability to control the undead and begin to unofficially take command of the Scourge forces within the keep. He used them to maintain control of Scholomance and attempted to seize Andorhal for himself. When Gandling's efforts to take Andorhal failed, he retreated back into Scholomance to bide his time. The defeat at the Battle for Andorhal left Dark Master Gandling in a foul mood. Determined to strengthen his defences, he began reanimating Rattlegore, imbuing the undead guardian with an insatiable desire to harvest raw materials from his enemies. In the 30th year after the events at the Dark Portal, Lillian Voss turned her wrath on the Scourge necromancers of Scholomance. She confronted Gandling in the Chamber of the Summoning, where he was supported by a group of Bone Weavers. A group of adventurers arrived to aid Lillian Voss, and together they defeated the undead forces. Gandling, however, managed to teleport further into Scholomance, escaping death. Lillian pursued him, but fell under his control, and he forced her to fight the adventurers instead. They managed to defeat Lillian and free her from his control, after which Lillian gathered her strength and attacked Gandling, breaking his enhanced bone shield, and with his protection shattered, Gandling retreated to his study. The adventurers then allied with the spirit of Lord Barov, who believed Gandling's defeat would finally allow his spirit to rest. Together, they launched an assault on the Dark Master and claimed victory over Scholomance. During the Burning Legion's invasion, the new Lich King Bolvar Fordragon ordered the Death Lord to rebuild the Four Horsemen and chose Tirion Fordring as their leader. Initially, Darion Mograine opposed this, believing Tirion deserved more than a life of torment and undeath, recognizing him as one of Azeroth's greatest champions. Ultimately, the Knights of the Ebon Blade had no choice but to comply with the Lich King, leading to the assault on Lightshope Chapel to try and recover Tyrion's body. Inside the Hall of Champions, where Tyrion's body rested, they confronted Lady Liadrin. Despite her efforts to stop them, she was defeated. Just as the Deathlord was about to seize Tyrion's body, the light intervened, burning the surrounding Death Knights. To ensure the Ebon Blade's survival, Darion opened a death gate for the others to escape, but it was too late for himself, and he perished from his wounds. Though the Silver Hand emerged victorious, Darion Mograine was later revived by the Deathlord aboard Acheras as the fourth and final horseman. With the 4 horsemen now complete and Darion as their leader, the Knights of the Ebon Blade were ready for the war against the Legion. This battle had significant consequences, severely damaging the relationship between the Ebon Blade and both the Silver Hand and the Argent Crusade. Years later, as the Scourge re-emerged, Argent Crusade sentries reminded the Death Knights of their past actions at Light's Hope Chapel. While they were not outright enemies, they were no longer considered allies. After the Fourth War, Matthias Shaw reported that the Argent Crusade still remained active in the Plaguelands. At Hearthglen, Mardenhold Keep served as a training ground for new recruits and a repository for artifacts recovered by the Crusade. Andorhal continued to be blighted, and reports indicated that Scholomance was still functioning as a necromancy school under investigation due to the presence of the Barovs and Dark Master Gandling's numerous minions. This vigilant state proved useful when Sylvanas Windrunner destroyed the Helm of Domination, unleashing the uncontrolled Scourge across Azeroth once again. During one patrol, the Argent Crusade spotted Nathanos Blightcaller sitting openly on his porch in the Eastern Plaguelands. They alerted the Alliance and the Horde, then joined the champions of Azeroth in battling Blightcaller, witnessing his death at the hands of Tyrande Whisperwind. These events would later be recorded in history as the period known as Death Rising.
Your power has grown. Oh, Tyrande, High Priestess, Night Warrior, completely powerless to stop the coming.
With these events, a chapter in the history book finally closes on the Plaguelands. As the last echoes of battle fade and the dust of ages settles, the story of the Plaguelands reaches a poignant conclusion. These lands, once a testament to the relentless onslaught of darkness, have witnessed the rise and fall of heroes, the clash of ideologies, and the undying spirit of those who fought for hope and redemption. From the Scourge of Undeath to the valiant stand of the Argent Crusade, every inch of this scarred earth has been soaked with sacrifice and the resolve to reclaim what was lost. Now, with the final chapter written, we honour the memory of all who bled, fought, and persevered. The Plaguelands, once a realm of beauty, then despair, stand as a symbol of resilience and the enduring light of Azeroth. Though the battles here have ended, their legacy will forever inspire future generations to stand against the shadows. Thank you for joining us through this journey through the history of the Plaguelands. As we close this book, we carry forward the lessons of bravery, unity, and hope. Until our next story, may the light guide your path.